Unveiling the 7 incredible mysteries of the Persian Empire, a transformative journey awaits. Sarah stood in her small living room, the festive smell of roasted turkey wafting in from the kitchen. She could hear the laughter of her siblings from the dining room, their voices sharp and bright, bubbling over stories of successful projects and promotions. Each Thanksgiving felt the same, their triumphs echoing around her like shadows she couldn't escape. She had dedicated her life to teaching history in a small Texas town, igniting the curiosity of her students about civilizations long past. But here, clinging to her mother's apron in the kitchen, she felt reduced to mere decoration. The kick of bitterness in her stomach reminded her of last year, when her brother's TED Talk had gone viral, flooding social media with accolades. Just a teacher. The words echoed in her mind like an unwanted dirge. What was she contributing? Just once, she wanted to be celebrated, not merely be the backdrop to her family's success. As the chatter crescendoed, she felt that familiar tug of inadequacy. She bid farewell to the festivities early, claiming fatigue. In the hushed stillness of her grandmother's attic, she flitted between boxes, each stuffed with cherished memories. Dust motes flickered in the light filtering through the cracked window, illuminating the forgotten treasures of her past. It was there, nestled among faded quilts and rusty antiques, that a box caught her eye. Inside lay ancient Persian artifacts, delicate pottery shards and jeweled trinkets that sparkled like secrets. Each piece seemed to hum with life, whispering stories of a rich heritage she had never explored. As her fingers traced the intricate designs, an old photograph slipped out, fluttering to the floor. It was a faded image of her grandmother, once a historical pioneer, standing proudly in front of a crowd, her smile unmistakable even in sepia tones. On the back of the photo, a note read, "The Persian Empire holds the key to understanding our world." Yet, those who dismissed her unconventional research had left her with a legacy smeared by scorn. Sarah's heart quickened, an ember igniting deep within her. What if she could reclaim her grandmother's passion and honor it through her teaching? But with that thought came a swell of fear. How could she, just a teacher, bring such focus to the classroom? She envisioned pitching her groundbreaking curriculum of the Persian Empire to the school board, but their dismissive attitudes felt like concrete ceilings stifling her dreams. "You're just a teacher, Sarah," her mind echoed, each word a weight dragging her down. She had nothing, yet everything to prove. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a— Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The very thought of presenting her ideas made her palms sweat. She envisioned her former mentor, that arrogant voice from her past, scoffing at her ambitions. Did he not remind her time and again that her dreams were impractical? The pit of anxiety grew deeper, fueled by the specter of his ridicule, sharper than her family's praise. Sarah felt like a tiny fish swimming in an endless sea of tension and resistance, fighting against a tide that seemed only to gather strength. The clock on the wall ticked ominously, each tick a reminder of the mounting pressure. Would she dare to step beyond the shadows this time? With the artifacts around her as a fragile shield and the portrait of her grandmother pressing heavily on her heart, Sarah was caught on the precipice between fear and a burgeoning resolve. What awaited her on the other side of this storm? As the weight of her past collided with the demanding expectations of the present, the battle within her intensified, and she stood trembling, ready to face whatever chaos loomed beyond. The light streamed through the attic window, illuminating Sarah's face. And for a moment, the dust motes danced around her, whispering of possibilities yet to unfold. She sat cross-legged among the remnants of a life lived with passion and purpose. The photo of her grandmother felt alive in her hands, a tangible link to a legacy she longed to embrace. Each artifact spoke of the past, of stories unlearned and truths waiting to surface. Driven by an urgency she hadn't felt before, Sarah abandoned thoughts of inadequacy. Why should the approval of the school board or the derision of her mentor dictate her worth? The realization washed over her like a wave. Her teaching was not about accolades, but about igniting the spark of curiosity in her students. What if the key to transforming her career lay not in their approval, but in embracing the very heart of her passion? With newfound determination, Sarah began to formulate a plan. She dove into research, her evenings filled with the monumental tales of the Persian Empire. Each reading ignited her passion. The grandiosity of empires, the sophistication of ancient culture, and the philosophies that shaped civilizations, revealing themselves to her like treasures unearthed. In those narratives, she found parallels to her own struggles, lessons of resilience and innovation thrumming with relevance. Days turned into weeks. The once quiet attic transformed into a sanctuary of ideas. Maps of ancient Persia peppered the walls, alongside detailed timelines and significant figures. Her fingers brushed the artifacts, connecting the dots from the past to the present, her grandmother's voice illuminating the dark corners of her doubt. As she created her teaching modules, she envisioned a curriculum that would not only educate, but also challenge her students to question, to think critically, to see the world through a broader lens. But self-doubt still lurked in the shadows. The impending school board meeting loomed over her like a storm cloud, ready to unleash its fury. Each time she practiced her pitch in front of a mirror, her heart raced at the thought of the panel. What if they dismissed her idea? What if they laughed? Her mind raced with the specter of judgment. "You're just a teacher," rang like an echo in a cavern of her insecurity. Yet, amid the fear, there was an uprising of strength. Sarah started writing down her thoughts, transforming her anxiety into words. "This is not just about me," she reminded herself. "This is about opening doors for my students." She stared deeply into her reflection and declared, "They deserve to learn about the richness of a culture that shaped much of our own world. My voice matters." The night before the meeting, she rested uneasily, torn between excitement and dread. Pacing her small living room, she made a decision. If she was going to approach this with courage, she had to shed the label of just a teacher. She would be a guide, a mentor, one who dared to tread into uncharted territories of history in her classroom. She envisioned her students captivated, eyes wide as she brought the stories of the Persian Empire to life. As Sarah gathered her notes and artifacts, a sense of clarity washed over her. She understood now that she was reclaiming not just her grandmother's legacy, but her own identity as an educator. This was her moment to step into the light, bridging her past and her aspirations. The morning sunlight broke through the attic window, illuminating her preparations with an almost divine glow. She knew that today was not just about a presentation, it was a declaration of who she was meant to be. The reality of the school board's decisions awaited, but in that moment she felt untethered from their verdicts. With each step she took toward her destiny, a long-thought question rose within her. What would it mean to truly own her narrative? With every pulse of her heart, she answered, ready to unveil her extraordinary plan. As Sarah stepped outside, anticipation coursed through her veins. Today would change everything, but it would take one final decision to shape the course of her future. Would she be bold enough to face the board and challenge the very foundations of their expectations? The answer would rewrite the stories she dared to tell. The air was thick with anticipation as Sarah approached the school building. Each step reverberated in her chest, the familiar architecture looming large, both a sanctuary and a battleground. Today wasn't merely another meeting. It was a crucible intended to test her resolve, a flashpoint for the future she envisioned.
As she reached the entrance, she glanced at a notice board plastered with announcements, reminders of routines and trivialities that had dominated her life for too long. She paused, reflecting
on the fleeting moments leading up to today. A surge of determination swelled within her, igniting a purpose she had never fully realized until now. Her palms clammy, she clenched her notes tightly. "What if this is the moment that changes everything?" she whispered to herself, feeling the weight of her own words. Inside, the hallway buzzed with the chatter of her colleagues. Each face seemed engrossed in the mundane, unaware of the storm brewing within her. Sarah bypassed the clusters of teachers engaged in small talk, their voices fading into the background as she focused inward. She imagined presenting her vision, an expansive curriculum that not only taught facts, but encouraged students to immerse themselves in the richness of cultures, to think, feel, and explore. With a deep breath, she headed into the conference room, the threshold a border between her insecurities and her aspirations. The board members' faces were expressions of skepticism and indifference, their reputations built upon a conservative pedagogical foundation resistant to change. She recognized the challenge ahead, a challenge that could either pull her back into the shadows of conformity or propel her into a new realm of possibility. Taking her seat, she unfolded her notes, each page a testament to the risen tide of her passion. She surveyed the panel, recalling their comments from previous meetings, their dismissals echoing in her mind like relentless waves crashing against the shoreline of her confidence. But today, she resolved to rewrite the script. As the meeting commenced, she focused on the rhythm of her breathing, anchoring herself. When it was her turn to speak, Sarah stood, heart racing but unwavering as she cleared her throat. The initial words fell from her mouth tentatively, but as she gained momentum, her conviction transformed her voice into a powerful tool of persuasion. She described the Persian Empire, a tapestry of innovation, art, and philosophy that not only shaped ancient civilizations, but also held undeniable relevance for the present world. There is a unique opportunity in teaching our students about the interwoven culture of the Persian Empire, she articulated. It fosters empathy and critical thinking in a world too often polarized by one narrative. The committee listened, their expressions shifting from passive interest to guarded attention. She felt the tides of doubt receding within her, replaced by a warmth that fueled her confidence. Yet one board member, Mr. Hargrove, a staunch traditionalist, leaned in with an air of skepticism. "While your enthusiasm is commendable, how do you expect to implement such a radical shift? What if parents resist this unconventional curriculum?" Sarah felt the sharp edge of his doubt slice through her momentum. But instead of flinching, she realized that this moment was foundational. The crux of her mission wasn't just about battling resistance. It was about inviting dialogue. "This isn't about forsaking existing curricula, but enriching it," she replied, eyes shining with sincerity. "By contextualizing history within a broader dialogue about contemporary implications, we equip our students not only with knowledge, but with perspective." In that moment, Sarah recognized a profound truth about her journey. She could not merely change perceptions, she could shift the very lens through which education was viewed. The board's uncertain expressions began to morph, and she sensed they were exploring her vision rather than dismissing it outright. Yet beneath her growing confidence, an unsettling thought emerged. What if she succeeded but the changes still fell short? What if the legacy she wished to build remained unfulfilled? The urgency of the moment intensified, the stakes higher than before. As the meeting drew to a close, Sarah felt a mixture of trepidation and hope. Had she done enough? The final decision loomed before her like a cliff's edge, waiting to be explored. She held her breath, anticipating the outcome. But it wasn't just the board's decision that would define her. It was the way she had chosen to navigate the terrain of her doubts. And as she prepared to hear their verdict, an exhilarating proposition bubbled to the surface.
What if this was merely the beginning of discovering not just her own legacy, but the legacies of others waiting to be unearthed in her classroom? The question danced in her mind, igniting a spark of curiosity that would keep the journey alive. A silence fell over the conference room, a potent mixture of anxiety and anticipation cloaking the air. The board members exchanged glances, their expressions oscillating between contemplation and reservation. Sarah's heart thundered in her chest, vulnerability enveloping her. But she recognized that this moment would not define her. Rather, it was merely a stepping stone. As they deliberated, her mind raced with possible outcomes. What would mean success for her? Approval from the board, validation from her peers, or the prospect of transforming her students' experiences? Each avenue had its merit, yet deep down a singular truth burned bright. She needed to believe in her vision, regardless of external validation. Finally, Mr. Hargrove cleared his throat, thrusting Sarah back into the present. "We appreciate your presentation, Ms. Green. However, we'll need to evaluate the implications further before making any commitments." As relief washed over her, she managed a nod, knowing she had seeded the conversation. With the meeting adjourned, she found herself standing outside while teachers filed past, discussing their mundane shenanigans. Alone with her thoughts, Sarah's resolve crystallized. Change was never easy, nor was it instantaneous, but she had ignited a spark that could potentially light a fire. In the following days, the narrative of her journey began to unfold like an intricate tapestry, a dance of small victories and introspective lessons. She decided to hold informal discussions with her colleagues, pooling insights on how to integrate wider historical perspectives into their curriculum. The idea flourished, veering away from her singular vision into a collaborative effort within her department. Yet with each shared thought came the fear of pushback. She recalled conversations with peers who seemed ambivalent, offering polite nods but little engagement. How could she foster a collective enthusiasm when
Even she struggled with the tidal waves of doubt? One afternoon, in a quiet moment of reflection, she unearthed an unexpected truth. She had long been comfortable in the shadows, her brilliance dulled by hesitation. The realization unsettled her. If she wanted to bring about meaningful change, she had to embrace discomfort, step into the limelight, and own her narrative. The essence of her curriculum was to encourage students to ask challenging questions, so why not model that practice herself? Determined, she devised a plan. Using her next team meeting as a platform, she would not only present ideas, but also stimulate discussion. It was time to shift the focus. The discussions would no longer simply be about her vision, but about the collective purpose they all shared within education. The day of the meeting arrived with a nervous excitement thrumming beneath her skin. Women and men filed into the room, their expressions a blend of curiosity and skepticism. With her notes in hand, Sarah turned the traditional presentation format upside down. She posed questions instead of delivering directives. What do we want our students to take away from our teachings? How can we incorporate a diverse range of perspectives into our lessons? Faces brightened, reflecting newfound interest. Her colleagues began to share stories from their classrooms, their voices growing animated. The conversation swirled and churned as ideas melded into a collective vision. By the end of the meeting, her heart swelled with an unexpected triumph. Not only did she illuminate her passion, but she had also tapped into the shared ideals of her colleagues, fostering a burgeoning culture of inclusivity and exploration. The air was charged with potential. But as she reveled in the nascent progress, nagging thoughts crept back in. What if her peers felt pressured to conform? What if this innovative approach disrupted the very fabric of their established routines? Doubt lurked with tenacity, reminding her the journey was far from over. But for the first time, she felt equipped to weather it. Perhaps, she mused, the most significant legacy I can build is teaching others to embrace resilience against uncertainty. As she returned to her classroom, Sarah's mind buzzed with ideas, possibilities unfurling before her like a map of adventure. Yet a lingering question echoed, compelling her to confront the depths of her self-belief. Was she truly ready to lead this transformation, or would the fear of fragility hold her back? With the essence of leadership and the weight of uncertainty ever present, Sarah stood on the cusp of uncharted territory, poised to tackle the challenges just beyond the horizon. Little did she know, the true test of her evolution was yet to come. Would she rise to the occasion, or would her insecurities pull her back into the shadows? The days that followed the meeting were filled with fluctuations of hope and trepidation. Sarah felt as if she were walking a tightrope suspended high above the ground, every step forward met by the relentless pull of doubt. The energy from her collegial discussions lingered, yet a pervasive anxiety settled in the pit of her stomach. What came next was the true measure of her courage. She decided to channel her apprehension into actionable steps. With her colleagues engaged, she needed to build on that momentum constructively. Yet, the idea of leading initiatives without comprehensive support felt daunting. Would anyone truly rally behind her? The thought treated her confidence roughly, pulling apart the surface of her newfound determination. The prospect of integrating extensive historical narratives felt like wrestling a giant beast. She envisioned expansive lessons that traversed time and culture, yet feared that her peers might not share her ambition. Still, Sarah understood that she had moved beyond the moment of merely presenting ideas. Now, she had to engage her peers in a collaborative phase with tangible outcomes. Deliberately, she organized a series of workshops aimed at developing lesson plans together. The sessions would not merely focus on her vision, but rather turn into a co-creation process. The first of these workshops loomed ahead, and she spent hours crafting invitations and agendas, attempting to solicit excitement while quelling her own fears. Each email sent felt like a step into unknown territory. She could either inspire or provoke resistance. When the day arrived, she breathed in deeply as educators filled the space, filling it with laughter and tentative conversation. Sarah felt alive yet vulnerable. Sitting in a circle, she opened with a question. What would it look like if we let our passion for history shape an inclusive narrative for our students? As the dialogue began, Sarah discovered something astonishing. In her eagerness to share her insights, she'd overlooked the wealth of knowledge her colleagues possessed. Each voice added a layer, uncovering shared experiences and diverse perspectives. Conversations swung from teaching methodologies to what it meant to be inclusive, revealing an unexpected camaraderie. But somewhere in that exhilarating exchange, self-doubt crept in, whispering relentless questions. Did she belong at the forefront as a leader? Was she still an imposter in disguise? Shaking off the thoughts, she listened intently to her colleagues' insights, absorbing their contributions with the realization that true leadership was not about diminishing herself to elevate others, but rather about rising together. Weeks rolled into one another, and unexpectedly, each succeeding workshop grew in popularity. As discussions deepened, Sarah felt a shift. Her colleagues began to share their vulnerabilities and strategies more openly. They supported one another, and through that collective strength, Sarah started to find her footing amidst the evolving professional landscape. Yet, with the positive reception came looming challenges. Some faculty members remained skeptical of the changes and openly questioned her intentions. Sarah faced this antagonism head-on, challenging herself to listen and respond, developing a resilience she previously thought elusive. Each difficult conversation tested her commitment, igniting both fear and resolve. One fateful day, after a particularly aggressive exchange with a veteran teacher resistant to change, Sarah paused, grappling with frustration. As she prepared to defend her vision, a thought pierced her clouded mind. What if, rather than arguing for her approach, she sought to understand the underlying fears of others? This pivotal decision sharpened her focus. The battles ahead would not be only about ideas, but about empathy and connection. By exploring the doubts embedded in others, she knew she could bridge the gaps in understanding.
And so began a new phase of her journey, learning, listening, and leading through connection. Yet, as she stepped into this refined view of leadership, a striking internal conflict surged. Would she find the strength to advocate for change without sacrificing her own needs? With the weight of her newfound responsibilities pressing down, Sarah prepared to delve deeper into the challenges of empathy as leadership. She faced an uncertain road ahead, filled with potential breakthroughs and hidden pitfalls. How would she navigate the tangled mess of emotions and agendas, and at what cost? The tension within Sarah swelled as she contemplated her next steps. Understanding the needs of her colleagues felt vital, yet the thought of compromising her vision was unsettling. The surrounding whispers of doubt still echoed loudly in her mind, stirring questions about authenticity and sacrifice. Would engaging with her colleagues mean diluting her ambitions? As she prepped for a crucial meeting with a particularly resistant colleague, Mr. Thompson, who had long been a staunch guardian of traditional teaching methods, her stomach churned. She had heard him vocalize his disapproval in previous workshops, raising objections not solely to her ideas, but to the fundamental approach she embraced. Now, on the cusp of facing him, she felt the weight of her decision. The stakes had never felt higher. The room was quiet upon her arrival, the air thick with tension as Mr. Thompson settled into his seat. Sarah focused first on her breathing, employing a technique she had learned to center her thoughts. Gone were the days of allowing heated confrontations to cloud her rationale. The objective was not to convince him, but to understand him. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice steady yet soft. "I wanted to hear your thoughts about our recent workshops and how we can evolve them together." The icebreaker was met with cautious words. "I appreciate the initiative, but I fear you might be overlooking the importance of established methods that have worked for us." Anger bubbled within her, but she stifled the urge to retaliate. "What about them do you feel is being overlooked?" she inquired, allowing curiosity to drive the conversation. As he spoke, Sarah listened closely for the threads of fear woven through his concerns. He was worried about student performance, the groundwork of which he felt was laid through traditional frameworks. She began to recognize his drive came from a desire to protect the students, a point of view she respected even as she sought a new path. "It's clear we share a common goal, providing the best for our students," she finally responded.
Before detailing her vision, what if we integrate the best of both worlds, a blend of historical context with your methodologies? Surprise flashed in his eyes, indicating her words began to chip away at his reservations. It was a breakthrough, proof that connection breeded understanding. However, Sarah felt the conflict within her amplify. What if the compromise meant her revolutionary vision would be stifled? Could they find common ground without losing the essence of what she hoped to introduce? Reflecting on the meeting afterward, the rush of adrenaline still streeted through her veins. Sarah felt exhilarated and drained all at once. She had faced a significant hurdle, but the blend of exhilaration and uncertainty gnawed at her heart. Had she truly navigated toward a solution, or merely prolonged the struggle? Recognizing that she possessed the competency to meld hard truths with progressive vision invigorated her. Yet, as the day faded, uncertainty lingered. Concessions and compromises were part of leadership, she reminded herself, but how far could she go before losing sight of her ultimate objective? Days passed, and new tension emerged in the form of the looming annual faculty meeting, where she would finally showcase her developed lesson plans. Would the fragile unity she had fostered enable her to push forward, or would resistance collapse everything she had labored to build? The prospect teetered before her, a make-or-break moment inherent in her journey as a leader. As she rehearsed her presentation, her heart raced at the thought of exposing herself to scrutiny. Yet she felt the intoxicating pull of possibility coursing through her veins. The moment that called her to action was not merely about teaching history.
It was about transforming the very fabric of her community's perspectives on education. Would she muster the confidence to step onto that stage, embrace her vision, and offer to lead with empathy despite the risks? Determined to find her voice, Sarah resolved to channel her fears into actionable steps. It was time to confront not just the audiences, but the narratives that shaped them. The last remaining doubt hovered. Would this culminate in her triumph, or would it unravel in a public discourse of resistance? As the day of the faculty meeting approached, Sarah's thoughts spiraled into a relentless cycle of preparation and anxiety. She had spent countless evenings refining her presentation, ensuring every detail would resonate with her audience. Yet beneath the surface, a tumult of doubt and determination surged within her. Her colleagues would be there, many of whom still clung to the old methodologies that she sought to challenge. The fear of rejection loomed large. What if they dismissed her ideas outright? What if her efforts to bridge traditional methods and innovative perspectives crumbled under scrutiny? As she stood in front of her mirror, rehearsing her opening lines for what felt like the 100th time, she caught her reflection staring back with a mixture of vulnerability and fierce resolve. This was not just a moment for her. It was an opportunity to redefine her role as an educator. Diving deeper into her thoughts, she reminded herself of the values that had propelled her towards this mission. Education was not merely about delivering content, it was about forging connections and inspiring curiosity. The more she focused on her purpose, the more her self-doubt began to dissipate. She embraced the reality that transformation often comes with discomfort. That discomfort, she realized, was a catalyst for growth, not an opponent to fear. Later that evening, she ventured to the dining room, where her partner Jake was immersed in a book. "How are you feeling about tomorrow?" he asked, glancing up with concern. "I'm nervous," she confessed, running her fingers through her hair. "I know that some of them will resist any change. Mr. Thompson will undoubtedly lead the charge." Jake leaned back, contemplating. "But you've already made strides with him. Remember how you connected by finding common ground? That matters." She nodded, but the weight of the impending confrontation loomed. They discussed her ideas, the intricacies of her lesson plans, and the rationale behind her approach. With each passing moment, as Jake encouraged her to articulate her vision, Sarah could feel the resolve solidifying within her. The next morning, she arrived at the meeting space early, where anxious energy mixed with the buzz of chatter. Colleagues gathered, shuffling papers and whispering. Yet she felt anchored in her purpose, a grounding element amid the chaos. She took a deep breath and envisioned the positive outcomes of her presentation. When the time for her presentation arrived, Sarah stepped onto the stage, a pulse of adrenaline coursing through her. The room quieted, and she locked eyes with Mr. Thompson, who sat stoically among the audience. For a fleeting moment she froze, and all the insecurities that had whispered in her ear surged back. But she steadied her breath and began to speak. As she detailed her lesson plans, blending historical context with modern teaching methods, the words flowed naturally. Her passion ignited the room, and she began to sense a shift. Tentative nods occurred amongst the staff, and she could see curiosity beginning to spark in their eyes. Yet, as Sarah proceeded, she felt a pang of anxiety. She was nearing the point where she would directly challenge existing methodologies, and her heart raced at the thought. Would this be the tipping point? Would she lose them? As she posed a question to the audience about their aspirations for their students, her gaze caught Mr. Thompson's once more. To her surprise, he appeared contemplative, visibly wrestling with her message. When Sarah opened the floor for discussion, she took a calculated risk, inviting challenges while framing her ideas through the lens of their shared values. The initial resistance some expressed was palpable, yet it felt different this time. They were engaging, not merely resisting, but questioning, sparking dialogue. The fire within Sarah grew as she navigated through their concerns, weaving her vision into an accessible narrative for their shared mission. But
then one voice rose above the murmur, a colleague known for his staunch opposition to change. You're proposing a significant shift, Sarah. What if it fails? What if it disrupts our students' learning? The room held its breath, tension thickening once more. Sarah felt exposed, but recognized this critical moment as an opportunity to deepen her arguments. She took a breath, preparing to address him directly. I understand the fear of failure. However, every innovation comes with risk. Isn't the real failure the reluctance to evolve? The question lingered in the air, and the implications of her words echoed in the silence. She realized she was not just fighting for her ideas, she was advocating for evolution in education itself. As the discussion evolved, she sensed the tide beginning to shift. Yet a new wave of uncertainty washed over her. What if, amid the progress, she had unleashed deeper divisions rather than unity? The meeting continued, and even as engagement transformed into heated but meaningful exchange, Sarah could not ignore the sense that a storm was brewing. Would these discussions lead to fruitful growth, or would they culminate in an outright conflict that would fracture the fragile developments she had fought to create? Amid those uncertain currents, a singular thought pierced through the noise. Her journey was just beginning. Would she step away emboldened, or would she find herself grappling with regrets of what might have been? The challenge of forging her educational legacy lay ahead, and Sarah was resolute in her determination to face whatever came next. The echoes of her words hung heavily in the air long after the meeting had concluded. Sarah left the conference room with a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration, her heart racing from the intensity of the discussions. As she walked back to her desk, she felt like she had pulled a thread in a tightly woven fabric, unsure whether it would unravel beautifully or lead to a complete fray. Each step deepened her contemplation. Had the seeds of her vision truly taken root, or had she merely precipitated a backlash? She dismissed the thought initially, but it swiftly returned to haunt her. In advocating for a curriculum shift, had she brought her colleagues together or partitioned them further? Their faces, those of uncertainty and curiosity, replayed in her mind, taunting her with the question of whether she could catalyze real change. Back at her desk, Sarah opened her notebook, flipping to the page where she had scribbled down her ideas. Yet, as she scanned the ideas, they felt less vibrant now, moments open to critique rather than avenues of inspiration. The doubt wormed its way into her thoughts. She had anticipated some resistance, however, the intensity of their skepticism surprised her. Perhaps they were reluctant to let go of ages of established practice, and the notion of change was a cruel adversary. Aware that action must follow reflection, she began to devise a plan, one that would not only reinforce her own ideas, but also consider the hesitations of her peers. This was no longer strictly about her lesson plans, but rather about creating a model where her colleagues felt included in the process. She needed to listen to their concerns, not just address them. A thought sparked. Could she turn this perceived division into an opportunity for collaboration? Calling on her skills as a facilitator, she drafted an invitation for a follow-up meeting, one not for presentation, but for dialogue, a chance for her colleagues to express their ideas and fears about the proposed changes. She envisioned the room filled with colleagues engaged in dynamic discussion, their skepticism transformed into constructive insights. Before she pressed send on the email, Sarah paused. Questioning her intentions, she contemplated what this new meeting would mean. Would she be surrendering her authority as an innovator, or was this a display of true leadership? She had always believed that fostering dialogue would not only validate her colleagues' perspectives, but might also refine her own approach. With renewed confidence, she hit send and felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The days that followed the email were a whirlwind of anticipation and nervousness. Would they respond positively or dismiss her entreaty? The lingering fears remained, gnawing at her resolve.
Yet the potential for collective growth outweighed her doubts. With the meeting scheduled, Sarah found herself diving deeper into her ideas while simultaneously preparing to listen intently to her colleagues. On the day of the follow-up session, the atmosphere in the room was electric yet tense. Colleagues trickled in, and Sarah could sense their apprehension as they took their seats. She began the session not by reiterating her vision, but by posing open-ended questions. What are your biggest concerns with potential changes? And how do you envision the future of our students' learning? As responses flowed, a realization washed over her. This was what she had craved, a genuine exchange of ideas. Their varied experiences painted vivid pictures of potential pitfalls as well as bright possibilities. She listened intently, absorbing each perspective. This wasn't merely about carving her path, but about nurturing a shared journey. Yet amidst the unfolding dialogue, an unexpected voice rose. A young teacher who had initially supported her ideas, but now expressed her unease with the unpredictability of change. If we embrace this shift, how do we measure its success? What if our students do react negatively? The question resonated like a strike of thunder, and Sarah's heart sank. What if they truly faltered? As she grappled with the implications, a profound clarity formed within her. This was no longer solely about her vision. It was about cultivating an adaptive mindset in a world where uncertainties could either stifle or spark transformation. The session concluded, but the conversation lingered in her mind. Each concern raised felt like an opening to a new chapter of collaboration. As colleagues filtered out, Sarah remained seated, recording notes, questions still buzzing amidst her thoughts. In her pursuit of change, she had ignited a flame.
But she now understood that sustaining it would require diligence and collective engagement. Glancing at her notes, she realized she had to navigate a more complex pathway forward than she had anticipated. Would she be able to foster an environment where risks were embraced as part of the learning process? Or would her initial burst of energy devolve into uncertainty once more? The stakes were higher now, and Sarah understood that the lessons ahead would test her leadership. Building trust was paramount, but would she have the fortitude to confront the unknown challenges that awaited her? As she gathered her things and prepared to leave, one question stirred in her mind, echoing her commitment to evolve. What groundbreaking revelations about herself and her colleagues lay buried in the complexity of their collaboration? The next few weeks felt like an intricate tightrope act. Sarah found herself navigating the delicate dynamics of her colleagues with increased awareness. She had engaged them in dialogue, but now the real work loomed ahead. The shared discussion yielded promising insights, yet the fear echoed louder than the enthusiasm. It became clear that addressing concerns was just the first step. The path to implementation was fraught with deeper obstacles. At lunch one day, Sarah sat at a table surrounded by familiar faces. Yet the atmosphere felt charged with latent tension. People spoke of student performance trends and budgetary constraints, their voices rife with urgency tinged by skepticism. She listened, stirring her salad with a fork absent-mindedly while reflecting on the significance of their words. It wasn't enough to hear their concerns. She had to unravel the complex motivations fueling their apprehensions. That evening, rummaging through her cluttered home office, Sarah unearthed a book on educational leadership. The pages were filled with anecdotes of teachers overcoming adversity through resilience and collaboration. Something clicked. She remembered that she wasn't alone in this struggle. Any change would necessitate a united front, and that required shared goals and collective accountability. The following morning, she crafted a different kind of communication, a video message meant for her colleagues. In it, she spoke candidly about her own fears regarding transformation and the unpredictable nature of their roles as educators in a rapidly changing world. She articulated her desire for their partnership, emphasizing that this shift required their voices, not just her vision. Her sincerity was a plea for collaboration, a chance to subvert the status quo and face uncertainties together. As responses began to trickle in, anticipation mixed with trepidation. Some expressed gratitude for her vulnerability, while others voiced further doubt. It humbled her, a reminder that change provoked varied emotions, and she needed to welcome the discomfort. Electronically, Sarah set up individual meetings with colleagues who had expressed apprehension.
Building deeper relationships had become imperative. During one conversation with a seasoned educator named Tom, who had been particularly vocal in his skepticism, she found herself wrestling with his concerns over practical assessments of student outcomes. How can we risk everything we've built? There's too
much at stake if we fail, he challenged, crossing his arms defiantly. Instead of countering defensively, Sarah engaged him with questions. What does success look like for you, Tom? What metrics uplift your teaching and learning experience more than prior models? As their dialogue unfolded, Sarah quickly recognized the core of Tom's fears, a pride in his established methods and an overwhelming sense of responsibility for the students' futures. Her empathetic approach allowed Tom's defense to soften, revealing a willingness to consider new perspectives once he felt heard. With each meeting, Sarah gathered insights that shaped her evolving strategy. She compiled lists of concerns, which led to the formulation of tangible steps toward the curriculum change. The transformation wouldn't happen overnight, but concrete benchmarks would serve as a safety net for her colleagues. Slowly, she could sense the resistance easing. They were beginning to share stakes of a change, even if the path appeared murky. At home, however, self-doubt crept back into her mind. Had she done enough? Would her efforts translate into action, or was she merely postponing the inevitable conflict? The tension climbed within her. She felt like she was balancing on a precipice between ambition and fear of failure. Days turned into a blur of planning and engagement, and just when Sarah felt a surge of accountability from her colleagues, an unexpected email arrived. An invitation to a district-wide meeting focused on the potential curriculum shifts she was championing. The details hinted at a critical discussion on what innovation should look like across multiple schools. Sarah's pulse quickened. The words district-wide meeting echoed ominously in her mind. Would her actions be scrutinized on a larger scale? Would this be an opportunity to cement her vision, or the moment her efforts crumbled under the spotlight? Gathering her notes, Sarah turned her attention to the task ahead. She had to prepare, but as she steeled herself for what was to come, a question simmered within her. What if, standing in front of that larger audience, forced her to confront the essence of her own insecurities? The time seemed to loom large as she readied herself for the impending uncertainties, both personal and professional, that awaited her. Would she rise to the occasion or find herself paralyzed by fear in the presence of her superiors? As Sarah stepped into the bustling conference room, a palpable mix of excitement and anxiety filled the air. The district-wide meeting was not merely a formality. It represented a significant opportunity and a formidable challenge. This was her moment to shine, to present the vision she had nurtured, to shape not only her fate, but potentially those of students across the district. The buzz of anticipation enveloped her, but beneath it lay a current of fear. How would her ideas be received? Would the board members, so deeply rooted in tradition, embrace her vision? Or would they dismiss her as just a teacher, continuing the cycle of underappreciation she had long battled against? Taking a deep breath, Sarah aligned herself. Her thoughts, reminding herself of the passion and purpose that had driven her forward. Stepping up to the podium, she caught the eyes of her colleagues, many of whom had come to support her, and felt a surge of solidarity. The presentation unfolded seamlessly, every slide painting a picture of the Persian Empire's influence on contemporary thought and culture, interwoven with her teaching philosophy that emphasized critical thinking and cultural empathy. As she concluded with a compelling call for collaboration among the schools, she could feel the tension in the room shift. Yet apprehension shadowed her every word, and when the board members began their questions, her heart raced. One member, a senior figure known for her harsh critiques, shot an eyebrow up. "Sarah, how do you plan to assess the effectiveness of this new approach? Our students are our priority, and any misstep could harm them." The straightforwardness of the question dug into her, igniting old fears. Misstep? Failure? Memories of just a teacher resonated starkly in her mind. But as she began to speak, she found her voice steadying.
We'll employ qualitative and quantitative assessments, tailoring them around creative projects that allow students to demonstrate their learning. The goal is to keep them engaged while maximizing understanding. As she spoke, she noticed nods of interest from some board members, a flicker of curiosity emerging from those who previously seemed resistant. Her pacing, her emphasis, her passion, they weren't just tools for persuasion. They were the realization of her journey. She was no longer only speaking about history, but also modeling the very essence of adaptive learning she wanted to instill within her students' hearts. Following her presentation, the board discussed feedback. Several members engaged in dialogues, inserting their perspectives into the nascent conversation she had kicked off. To her growing relief, strong support began to manifest, and she even caught glimpses of respect dawning in the faces of some traditionally skeptical peers. The day culminated not only in approval for the pilot program she proposed, but also in an invitation to lead a workshop series across the schools, an unequivocal recognition of her leadership aspirations. The sense of culmination rushed over her. It was no longer about charting a new course alone, but pioneering a path for collaborative evolution within her field. Days melted into weeks as the implementation phase began. Sarah was now a pivotal force, designing workshops that encouraged fellow educators to share their insights and experiences. Together, they developed not only material, but reinforced their community of voices, weaving new methodologies into the fabric of their teaching practices. During the ensuing sessions, vulnerability surfaced. Educators shared their fears, their triumphs, and above all, an eagerness to adapt. Sarah garnered admiration, but more importantly, she developed deep bonds with her colleagues, hearing their narratives and respecting their long-held traditions. Each discussion became a canvas of shared histories, and Sarah felt herself thrive within this environment. On a particularly routine afternoon, amidst the hustle of lesson planning, Sarah stumbled upon a note from her former mentor, the one who had often doubted her ambitions. A soft chuckle escaped her lips as she read his words from years ago. "You have all the potential, but can you be the change?" Sitting back in her chair, Sarah realized she had profoundly shifted not only her trajectory, but also the collective narrative of her educational community. She was not just a teacher, she was a pioneer. Was there still fear? Indubitably. But it was a fear muted by resilience, buoyed by the knowledge she had actively reclaimed her narrative. The future remained uncertain, but it shimmered with boundless potential. Ultimately, Sarah understood that her triumph lay not just in achieving recognition or embracing the moniker of a leader. It was in uncovering her voice, forging connections, and transforming skepticism into enlightenment. The Persian Empire's resonance she had once admired now took root in her teachings, influencing her students and colleagues alike. As she entered her classroom one bright morning, surrounded by her students eagerly waiting to explore the new curriculum, she felt a sense of fulfillment that transcended mere success. In them, she glimpsed the embodiment of her journey, the possibility of transformation through inquiry and open dialogue. With a heart full of gratitude, Sarah turned to her students, ready to take them on a journey through time and ideas, knowing that only by embracing their own curiosity would they find their transformative paths ahead. You need to subscribe now to ensure you catch our next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support is truly appreciated. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Sarah's transformative journey. Don't wait even one more second to share this story. Send it to at least 5 friends who need to be inspired by the power of personal growth.